This is DoNotCiv. This is going to be a bit of a rambling rant. I know I should probably, write out my ideas on a sheet of paper in Notepad and, structure these videos a little bit more. But, I tried that once, and reading from an outline, and you know what it sounds like? It sounds like somebody reading from an outline. So, I'll just I think I'll do the more free format approach. It just seems to be more natural and seems to work better on these videos than reading from a prepared script. But I don't know. Let me know what you think. So yeah, I haven't really felt like making a video lately, just because kind of felt like I was repeating myself, starting to repeat myself, and I may do that as well here in this video. Like I said, this is going to be a bit of a ramble. Yeah, I still haven't gotten over this cold or flu or whatever it is as well. Let's see. So I watched the Joe Rogan podcast last week. It was a few days ago, I guess. And they had Peter Joseph on, or he had Peter Joseph on, who is the guy behind the Zeitgeist movies. Now, I don't want to say the Zeitgeist Movement, because he made it very clear in that podcast, in that interview, that he did not want to be considered a figurehead or a leader. I mean, by default, he is a leader, whether he wants to be or not. But he didn't want to be considered like the spokesman, the official spokesman for the Zeitgeist Movement. So, but he did create the movies. I believe there's three of the Zeitgeist movies out now. I think he's working on a fourth, and then he's actually going to do a fifth, and that'll close out the series. I know I've seen at least one of the Zeitgeist movies. I think I saw the first one, and it was long. It was like 2-3 hours, as I recall, but I did watch the whole thing. I'm not so sure that I've seen the second or third. Now, I have issues with the Zeitgeist Movement, and I have issues with sort of a companion project called the Venus Project. The two tend to go hand in hand, although I understand from Peter Joseph that there's been a little bit of a falling out between the Zeitgeist Movement and the Venus Project, and I guess, I don't know. I have no idea what happened, but I guess they're not on speaking terms anymore. Something happened. Maybe the Jock Fresco guy, I think that's his name, Jock Fresco? Fresco? Like I said, I'm winging this. I'm not doing it from a script, but I think that's his name, who's behind the Venus Project. I was on their website the other day and looked at some of their offerings. Yeah, so I have some issues with both of those movements, and I guess I might as well get into them here a little bit. Now, I did not watch this podcast or watch this interview for the purpose of re-irritating myself over issues that I already knew I disagreed with Peter Joseph about. That wasn't my intent. I'd never heard the guy speak, so I wanted to hear him speak. I wanted to kind of hear what he was all about, and he's incredibly eloquent. He's a very smart guy, a lot more eloquent than I'll ever be, that's for damn sure. And the podcast was about 2 hours long. I guess I'll link to it down below. I found myself agreeing pretty much. For the most part, I found myself agreeing with a lot of what he had to say. I'd say 80% of it, maybe even 90% of it, I found myself agreeing. And some of it was just effortless agreement. When he was talking about a system that is not sustainable, that is, right on the brink of the precipice, that's going to go down, and he described that as an inevitability. Yeah, effortless agreement on that point. And he said a lot of things that made sense, but you tend to remember, I do anyways, you tend to remember the things that you disagreed with more than the things you agreed with. I'll make an effort not to just be critical of that interview, because he said some things which were very powerful. He actually busted me on one of my trips. I was listening to this podcast, and I got to thinking about some things that I'm doing in my own life that were inappropriate, or just trying struggling for the right word here, just out of balance, I guess. You know, it's easy, you look at other people, it's easy to bust other people on their trips, on other people's trips, right? You can see what somebody's doing wrong, or you can see another person's illogic or irrationality, and it's easy to bust other people on their trips. It's really hard to bust yourself on your own trips. And he made a statement. I knew instantly who he was referring to. He was talking about the sociopathy of creating a 40-room mansion for yourself and parking 2 jumbo jets outside in your front yard. And I knew instantly he was talking about John Travolta, because there's not many people, you know, famous celebrities who match that description. And he described that kind of grotesque, ultra consumeristic, white-hot consumeristic fetish. He described that as an act of violence. And I would agree with him on that. I would agree with him that's just disgusting, hyper-consumptive spectacle, serves no purpose, does nothing good for humanity. Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if, you know, we should trace the origins of that kind of crazy behavior to Scientology, but I don't have a personal lawyer, so I don't know how much I want to dig into that organization, because they're incredibly litigious and come after anybody who seems to criticize them. But maybe there is some correlation there. Yeah, I'll let you be the judge of that. Anyways, he described that kind of that ridiculous, spectacular, hyper-consumptive, selfish behavior as an act of violence, and it got me to thinking. I like to dive, I like fishing, and one of my fantasies has always been, well, I guess you could call it a dream, to have my own dive and fishing boat. But I got to thinking about that. I go, why? There's no reason. I can pay for a berth on a dive boat. I can pay to go out on one of the fleet boats out of San Diego and go on a fishing trip. I don't need to have my own fishing boat. And I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about that kind of desire to have those things in life is no longer appropriate for us to have those kind of desires. Not at a time when, planet's just burning down all around us, and it's really not appropriate to have those kind of selfish fantasies, even as a thought. That's what I mean by busting myself on my own trips. We all hear about these people who win the lottery. They win $100 million, and they go do the most stupid, asinine things. I read a story about a husband and wife. They struck it rich, and the first thing they did is they went out and they had a bunch of dogs, but they got 40 dogs, and they built 40 air-conditioned dog houses for their dogs. I mean, that's kind of stupid, disgusting, asinine behavior that is so typical of people who get rich, by playing the lottery. They typically never do anything that has any net value for humanity or society whatsoever. It's just pure consumption and stupidity and selfishness, and those people are they're piles of shit, in my opinion. But you see, this gets back to the whole dreams and thoughts and fantasies of, what would you do with, if you had that money. And I realized, one of my dreams was to have a fishing boat. But, why do I need it? There's no need for me to have my own boat. I can go pay for, I can go charter a boat. Or like I said, I can go, pay for a berth on a dive boat. There's no need for me to have there's no need for me to engage in that kind of ridiculous, selfish, hyper-consumptive, materialistic behavior. Okay? Okay, I'm sorry. I beat that to death maybe a little bit too much, but that was one thing that came out of listening to the Peter Joseph, Joe Rogan podcast that kind of helped me in my own life. So I said I wanted to, say some positive things. That was one of them. All right, I guess I'll get to the point here. If I let myself, what I don't like about the Zeitgeist movement. Well, I've talked about it in I'm sure at least one video, if not two. I don't think they have a good, firm, realistic grasp of reality, especially as it pertains to peak oil. I don't see it. I don't see it. I'm going through my head how I want to segue into this topic, because there's some ideas that I want to pull together, and I want to kind of make this one, coherent, cogent argument. Okay, so one of the ideas that I want to introduce into this argument, and I will tie it back to the Zeitgeist Movement, but first I want to talk about something called the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 5 Stages of Grief, and you'll see how this is going to tie in just a few minutes. Now, EKR came up with this 5 stages of grief to describe the dying process. For example, a person who's suffering from terminal cancer will very often go through this process, and she noticed that it was so similar from patient to patient that she actually, developed a doctrine around this called, the 5 stages of grief. And basically how it works is, there's 5 stages. The first is typically denial. The second is anger. The third is what's called a bargaining phase. The fourth is depression. And then the fifth is acceptance. So, for example, say if I, wake up one morning, I'm pissing blood. I look at it, well, geez, it'll probably get better on its own. It's nothing. I'll pop a couple vitamins and, eat healthier. Okay. That typical of the denial phase, deny there's something wrong. Then I go see a doctor and he says, well, you have urinary tract cancer or something like that, pancreatic cancer or something. And the next stage is typically anger. Why me? I'm a good person. I ate a vegetarian diet. Why did life dish out this cruel punishment to me? Why did you do this to me, God? Or, typically anger. Okay, and then the third phase is what's called a bargaining phase. And now, please be clear on this point. I am not suggesting how if you're unfortunate enough as to have a terminal illness, I am not suggesting how you should deal with this in any way, shape, or form. How you approach your healthcare is of course your own business. I'm just using this as an example, and I'm going to tie it back into peak oil and the Zeitgeist Movement. So let's just be clear on that. Okay. Now this third phase is often called a bargaining phase, and that's where the person tries to weasel out of their predicament by any means necessary. And humans can be very creative in this regard. So, okay, first, maybe I won't die. I'll do this. I'll do the elective surgery. I'll do the surgery. Well, that didn't work. Okay, now I'll do the chemotherapy. Well, that didn't work. Okay, I'll do the radiation treatment. Okay, now I'll do the gamma knife. Exhausted all those options. Still have the cancer. Shit. I know. I probably didn't pray to Jesus enough. Sorry about that, Lord. I'll spend an hour a day praying. If you just let me live, I'll spend an hour a day praying to you. I know. I've heard about these Indian sweat lodges. I'll go do that. Maybe if I do a few sweat lodges, do some chelation therapy, I can beat this thing. Power of positive thinking. If I just think good thoughts, I can get over this. You get how this goes, right? It just spins on and on and on for as long as the person wants to go through this charade, this pantomime behavior. I'll give you 6 of these, and you give me a half a dozen of these. That's why it's called the bargaining phase. It's because people think that they can trade certain. It's usually trade in the form of behavior for wellness and health. So anyway, that's called the bargaining phase, and some people just get locked in that phase. Well, actually, you can get locked in any one of these. You can get locked in denial, you can get locked in anger, you can get locked in the bargaining phase. But usually, very, very often, people will get locked into this bargaining phase, and they'll bargain right to the very end without, they'll never give up. But there comes a point in time where you simply are done bargaining. You can't bargain anymore. You've exhausted all your options. And then it hits you. The reality of your situation hits you, and you go into a very deep depression, typically. And then that can, again, you can get locked in that depressive phase, and it could last, until death. But if you come out of the depression, you can get to a point of acceptance. I would say, I would use Steve Jobs as an example of somebody he'd gone, I don't know if he'd gone through the first 3 phases or not, but he clearly had come out of the depressive phase, and he had just simply accepted his illness for what it was. And, and in that phase, it's not like your acceptance doesn't mean, you're looking at the bluebirds and skippity-doo-dah, skippity-yay. No, it's an oppressive burden to have a terminal illness, but you're still able to function. Just as Jobs in his final months, he was still able to function. He was able to do productive work, which you can't do when you're in depression. When you're in deep depression, you're almost catatonic. You're immobilized, by the depression. But you get into that acceptance phase, which is where I am with peak oil. I've gone through all 5 of these phases, and I'm now at acceptance. It's not a bright, cheery place to be, but I can function. I can do productive work, etc. So, tying this back in with the Zeitgeist Movement, where I think the Zeitgeist Movement is, can you guess, by the way, before I say it? If you said stage 3 bargaining, that's exactly my opinion. I think that the Zeitgeisters are in that stage 3 bargaining phase, and they're coming up, in some cases and also I would lump Venus Project in with this, they're coming up with all kinds of fantastical, phantasmagorical, futuristic Walt Disney creations that are going to keep this system running. The skyscrapers with the vegetable gardens growing off the side. I heard Peter Joseph talk about, Joe Rogan was actually asking him some I thought, very insightful questions. He was saying, well, you're advocating windmills and solar panels. Well, how is this energy going to be stored? Wind doesn't blow all the time. Sun doesn't shine all the time. And it was a great question, and Peter Joseph responded, well, they're working on these supercapacitors that are supercapacitor. No, I'm not a technophobe. I'm not saying that, a lot of things that people thought were science fiction did become science fact. I get that. But there were so many things that he was throwing out, like photovoltaic paints and this supercapacitor idea. And Joe was saying, so, wait a minute, you're saying we don't need things like lithium-ion batteries? And because, I guess Joe is savvy enough to know that the rare earth minerals to make those batteries has to come from mines in Africa and South America, often mined with slave labor, and we're running out of those rare earth minerals. He was pretty astute, I thought. And Peter Joseph, I thought, was just very dismissive of these concerns and said, supercapacitors, and we'll bridge the gap with this. And it was all just, it was a lot of Fantasyland mush, in my opinion. And what really got my goat, so to speak, what really raised the hackles and irritated me quite a bit was one thing more than any other comment. I'll find this. Here, you know what? I'm going to play this for you. I'm going to stop here, play this comment by Peter Joseph, and then I'll pick up. So, listen.
There's too many of us. Clearly, right?
No, it's not too many of us.
No?
Nope, I don't agree with that at all. That's some people, intuitively speaking, you would want to say that. I think the world can hold many, many more times the number of people if it was properly structured.
But we have to also deal with something different as far as like fuel, right? We can't be a carbon-based.
No,
we can't be a fossil fuel-based.
Another great paradigm shift is we've been living off of fossil deposits, which is one of the most ignorant things possible since we're surrounded by the movement of energy from the sun and everything else. We have these, there's no crisis in energy. There's no energy problem. There's only the crisis of ignorance, as I stated before, and that's really the big thing. We have plenty of energy.
Now that bugged the shit out of me. That really bugged the shit out of me when he said, we can support many times the amount of people on this earth if things are properly structured. I mean, I'm going to have a field day tearing this apart. First of all, I think almost any sane person rational person would agree that 7 billion people on the planet is too fucking much. Okay? That's like the starting point for this discussion. But to say many times, well, many certainly means more than 2 and probably means more than 3, but let's just say 3. So 3 times the current population, that's 21 billion people. Where in the fuck are you going to put all these people? We can't even manage to feed and care and house and handle all the 7 billion that we have now. You want to put 21 billion fucking people on this planet? God. Well, that was really the only part of that interview that really got me angry, and I was just going to focus on that. I almost stopped listening to the interview. I did listen to the whole thing, the whole 2 hours, and sort of glad I did, but because that was really the only thing that really, really pissed me off. Now, he also said something that was just chicken shit argumentation tactics. He said, we can support, well, what you just heard, we can support many times the number of people if things are properly structured. Did you catch that? Did you catch that bit where he said, if it's properly structured? Okay. In video game parlance, what he did was introduce a cheat into the argument, where he can never lose the argument, right? That's called a cheat, when you say if things are properly structured. Because no matter what argument I put forward to oppose the idea that we can't handle 21 billion people, he can instantly come back with, if things are properly structured. Well, yeah, your argument fails because you didn't create a society where things are properly structured. Get that? That's bullshit. That's not honest argumentation. That's not solid logic. And I ran into this. There's some guy, I forget what his name was. He was doing, he made a video called Human Exceptionalism, and I know Derived Energy really took him to task for that. And I watched this video, and I sort of got into it. I try not to get into comment wars on other people's videos, and I initially did not go to his page to try and start a comment war, but that's kind of how it ended up. And I'll leave him in peace. I don't believe in badgering people and hounding them on their own page, even if I disagree strongly. But he made this argument. What I'm doing is I'm giving another example of how you introduce cheats into arguments. So anyway, this guy, I forget his name. He made this argument that it was about about happiness. He made this argument that the key to purpose and meaning in life, or meaning and purpose, was happiness. That was one of his, he was almost treating that like an axiom. And I made an argument, which I thought was pretty good, pretty solid, that, well, no, happiness cannot be the key to meaning and purpose in life. And I used an example. I said, say you had somebody who's very selfish and very hedonistic. That person, provided that they were, wealthy enough to have all their needs supplied and all their indulgences catered to, that person could be said to be happy. But most people, objectively looking at such a human being, would say, no, this person's living like a pig, a hedonistic pig, and there's very little value or merit or purpose or meaning in that person's life. Right? I thought that was a pretty good argument. And he came back and he said, well, no, what this selfish hedonistic pig scenario that you just laid out, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about, and I'm using finger quotes here, true happiness. Get it? True happiness. So he introduced this cheat into his argument where he can never lose. Because no matter what argument I put forward that happiness cannot be the key to purpose and meaning, he can say, well, you're not describing quote-unquote true happiness like I am, right? That's a couple examples of how you can cheat with the argument and be dishonest. So anyway, I haven't gone back to his page or his videos, and I don't plan to. So, getting back to Peter Joseph and the Joe Rogan podcast and the Zeitgeist Movement. So Peter Joseph introduced this thing this concept of properly structured, right? We can do all this Fantasyland nonsense if things are properly structured, right? And properly, who knows what that means? I mean, I'm not even going to, that could, the number of properly structured scenarios that you can possibly conceive of can grow exponentially, you know, to resist all efforts to catalog them. So I thought this was really just kind of chicken shit, bullshit argument that Peter Joseph put out. He was not addressing, it wasn't being real. It wasn't being honest with the argument, with the overpopulation argument, and he was advocating this, what James Howard Kunstler calls this techno-triumphalism, you know, the whole supercapacitors and photovoltaic paints and, you know, all this Star Trek-y crap. Well, okay. Here's why that's, here's why I feel that's a cul-de-sac to go down. You shouldn't put future, you shouldn't posit this huge geometric or arithmetic growth in the population and say it's not a problem because we're going to have all this Star Trek-y technology to deal with it before that technology actually exists. Do you buy that? You should. I think it's pretty self-obvious, right? I shouldn't say, let me try to come up with an example here. I'm going on a hike out deep into the woods, deep into the wilderness, and I don't bother to take along, maybe I bring a folding pocket knife. I don't bother to bring along any water, any food, nothing. Just go out in some sandals and go for sandals and shorts and go for a hike deep in the wilderness, with the idea being, oh, I'll find some water along the way. I'll find some food along the way. I'll create with my folding knife, I'll create some shelter along the way. It'll be fine, you know. And if somebody takes me to task on that and says, "Oh, wait a minute, you know, you're kind of putting yourself at risk there, aren't you?" I say, yeah, my trusty folding knife, I can handle any situation. That, I think, I'm being a little facetious, but I think that's kind of like what Peter Joseph was doing in this interview with Joe Rogan. He was saying, yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the population thing. You know, we're going to have all this technology. We'll deal with it, you know. And technology hasn't been invented yet. In fact, in some cases, probably hasn't even been conceived yet. Or even designed at a conceptual level yet. Okay, so that I took strong exception to. Now, I said I was going to try to tie all this together. I think the Zeitgeist movement as a whole is really guilty of this whole bargaining, being locked in this bargaining phase and not being self-aware about it, not being self-conscious of the fact that they're in this bullshit bargaining phase where they're saying, well, yes, the oil is running out, you know, the oil is running out, and we acknowledge this is a serious problem. That's how you know when somebody's about to hit you with the bargaining argument, because they start out by acknowledging the problem, but not really. But even though the oil's running out, we can build windmills. We can put in solar farms. We can build giant skyscrapers with interior and exterior gardens to grow our food. We can build electric cars. We can build hydrogen fuel cells and use that to store the power. And on, you know, on and on. It's basically acknowledging the problem without really acknowledging it, because we can bargain with fate, right? We can bargain with the future with all this to be created futuristic technology, right? And that's the game, and that's what they're locked in. And I knew that. I've long known that about the Zeitgeist movement, that's their modus operandi. That's their typical mode of behavior. So I didn't watch this video, like I said, with the purpose of re-irritating myself over what I knew to be issues and points that I already knew in advance I disagreed with. That wasn't the purpose why I watched this podcast. But I'm just laying it out for you here in case you haven't heard this before or heard me talk about it before. I'm just kind of giving my assessment and appraisal of what TZM is all about. So what else? What else? I don't want this. It's not like they're a one-trick pony or anything. They've got a pretty broad, expansive agenda, and like I said, a lot of the things I agreed with. I think this idea of a resource-based economy, what's called an RBE, versus a monetary-based economy, has some merit. I'd like to see that explored a little bit more, because I'm not quite sure the mechanics of how that would work. How we get rid of the money and how we move to this resource-based economy. But I do think I like the sound of it. It sounds like it might work. Because you can make a currency out of anything. You can make a currency out of oil, right? You can make a currency out of time. There was a movie I saw, I guess a few weeks ago, called In Time, and I thought it was going to be like this B-grade piece of shit because it was starring Justin Timberlake, but the guy's got pretty good acting chops. I was actually surprised. It was a good movie, and it tells a story about a future society, a sort of a dystopic society, where currency is measured in time. Everybody's given, it's sort of like I guess a takeoff on Logan's Run in that respect. Everybody is given 25 years to live. Then on your 25th birthday, your counter starts, and you're given one more year. So you die at 26, unless you go to work in the slave state and work for the slave economy. And by working, you earn minutes. You earn minutes and hours that you add to your life. And the way that they deal with the population problem in this movie is they simply make it more and more expensive to live. So a cup of coffee might cost 5 minutes today, and they'll raise the price to 10 minutes tomorrow, etc. So it just becomes more and more expensive to live, and this, in essence, basically kills people off. Very interesting movie. I recommend it. I did think it was quite good, actually. And it shows how you can basically make a currency out of anything. You can make a currency out of any commodity. You can make it out of gold. You can make it out of time, in this case, right? So it's a very interesting, thought-provoking movie. So, yeah, I think I would like to see, this idea of a resource-based economy explored a little more. Clearly, see if you're with me on this point. I think this monetary system that we currently have is doomed. I would state is an axiom. I don't know. Tell me whether you believe that's true or not, whether you think it has a future. But what the central banks are doing, I think in large part, is I would liken it to some kind of a burlesque act. You ever see those burlesque acts where the guy is spinning plates on top of poles, and he's got like 8-9 plates spinning, and he keeps trying to add plates and keep them all spinning, and basically he gets too many plates going at the same time, and they start crashing to the floor. It's an old burlesque act. If you haven't seen it. Anyway, that's what I would liken what, Bernanke and the Federal Reserve and the other European central banks. To me, it's analogous to that type of burlesque act, what they're doing, trying to keep the economy afloat by pumping money in. And it is doomed to failure. It is absolutely doomed to failure. For one thing, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but the banks, all of them, are insolvent. They're not just insolvent. They're insolvent multiple times over. That's how insolvent. That's how broke they are. And I don't know how many. There's quadrillions of dollars of derivatives money out there. And this, I can't predict when it's going to collapse. I can't tell you even how it's going to collapse. I just know it's going to collapse. And man, it's just going to be chaos writ large all over society. So if you buy that as a premise, or as an axiom rather, then we've got to come up with some other type of system, financial system, and it can't be based on fiat currency. It's just not going to work. How we get there, how we cross that chasm to something like a resource-based economy, I'm not smart enough to tell you that. I didn't graduate from the Chicago School of Economics like Milton Friedman and Alan Greenspan, but somebody pretty smart is going to have to start thinking about this, because I think this systemic collapse is imminent. And I guess to get back to that point about bargaining, I guess, yeah, the Fed, the people at the Fed governors are smart. I think they know that what they're doing is doomed to failure. But I think the people who are buying into this are the politicians, Congress, right? Their spending programs cannot exist unless the Fed continues to monetize the debt and print more and more money, right? Unless the Fed does that, there's no social welfare programs, there's no military, big budgets for military expeditions to halfway around the world to go cause trouble. Nothing. I mean, there's no there's no money to keep the system going. And I think the Fed is perfectly well aware of this. I mean, these guys all have PhDs in economics. I mean, they're not stupid, but politicians are stupid. Politicians, with very few exceptions, I'd say Ron Paul being one, maybe a handful of people in Congress realize the real game, but most of them, they're quite dumb. They're really quite dumb, most of these congressmen and senators. And I mean, you look at a guy like Rick Santorum. Whoa, daddy, is that guy a dull knife? Man, that guy's like got a 9-volt battery powering his brain. Really, just a dumb person. And that's who, lots of people think that would be a good person to have in the White House, an idiot like that. And, to be honest, I'd rather have an idiot than a psychopathic conservative like a Newt Gingrich, or a real cold-hearted, just bastard like Mitt Romney. Yeah, I'd rather have an idiot, at least an idiot, like a W or a Ronald Reagan. You can have intelligent people around him, telling him what buttons to push. So, yeah, I guess having an idiot in the White House isn't the worst possible outcome. But I'm just making a general statement about the kind of legislators that we have up on the Hill. Ain't no Thomas Jeffersons or Ben Franklins or George Washingtons up there. You can pretty much take that to the bank, pun intended. Okay, so I said this was going to be a bit of a ramble. I don't know what else I want to touch upon here. I guess maybe finish up on the Zeitgeist Movement. I think for that movement to really be taken seriously, a couple things need to happen. They need to flesh out their ideas some more, and they got to get out of this bargaining phase, this Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Stage 3 bargaining phase, and stop coming up with Fantasyland, futuristic, Star Trek-y explanations of how this is all going to work once the oil runs out. For me to take them seriously, that's a gating factor. If they're going to continue to persist in this bargaining phase and deny the brutal realities of peak oil, for me that's a no-starter for that movement. And some of you have already sent me links to Zeitgeist Movement, and I appreciate that. But until I see an evolution of that movement beyond the Stage 3 bargaining phase, that's going to be a no-starter. We got to be big boys and girls about this. We got to be almost cold, almost clinical in our assessment of the current condition, and being cold hard. Here's the situation. Here's the challenges that we face, and if you've got realistic solutions, put those up on the table. But no Fantasyland, techno-triumphalist bullshit. Don't do that. Yeah. So what else? I guess that's enough for a video. I thought I had one or two other ideas I wanted to toss around, but just kind of a rambling rant about all that stuff. Zeitgeist Movement, Peter Joseph, Venus Project. So I'll leave it there, and go ahead and comment away, or just don't be preposterously rude or an asshole. And yeah, I don't care. You can disagree with me, but just don't be a jerk, or I will block and delete you. Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening, and